Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Startup Sense podcast. This is your host, Jonah Lupton. Another great episode for you today. Thanks for joining us. So today's guest is JB Osborne. He is the co-founder of a company called Red Antler. They are a branding agency out of New York in Brooklyn. Company about 75 people strong. They are self-funded, which is probably pretty typical for an agency. They work with some very well-known brands like Foursquare and Casper, the mattress company. Bowery, which is a vertical indoor kind of gardening company, if you want to call it that. MissionU, all these names are on their website, which is redantler.com. And let's welcome JB to the show. JB, how are you, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. So talk to us about your agency. What exactly do you guys do?
Yeah, so we started about 10 years ago with the mission of helping entrepreneurs launch new and disruptive businesses, and we've built out a very holistic approach to building brands, designing experiences, telling stories. And we work primarily with very early stage companies to help them launch and go to market, and with later stage venture backed businesses looking to rebrand, reposition, evolve the brand and experience, and take an approach that starts with understanding a sort of consumer insight and the problem that we're solving, defining a core idea that we can build a brand around, and then bringing that to life through a visual identity, through messaging and brand voice, through a digital experience, whether it's an e-com site, marketing site, application, physical experience with product, packaging design, interiors and environments, and then thinking about how we launch that brand through activation, advertising, and producing all the content that we need, from photography to video to motion animation. So really thinking about the end-to-end customer experience and building a brand world that makes people feel something and engage and really understand what a company is all about, what they stand for, and why they should care.
And when do companies typically engage you? I know in our pre-call you said that sometimes it's very early in the idea stage. Sometimes it's larger conglomerates that are probably introducing new products to the market and they need some help. But when do you guys like to get involved?
Yeah, we get excited to be involved really early, and that comes with a caveat because saying, we'll work with someone who's got an idea, there's a lot of different variations of, entrepreneurs who have an idea for a business, but the ones that we wind up being the best fit for are businesses that are planning to raise around the funding, typically in the realm of a few $1 million, to launch their product or service. And we really love getting involved when there are still questions to be answered. And as long as there's a vision of, where they want to go, what they want to stand for, we love rolling up our sleeves, getting involved, helping with product decisions, and working alongside teams to get that business to market. So I'd say there's not really a moment that's too early unless someone doesn't really even know what they're doing. But then we also enjoy getting involved with businesses that have reached a point where, they really know who their customer is, they've got a great product or service, and before they hit the gas and focus on growth, they want to take a step back, reflect, pull things apart, put it back together, and ensure they've got a really tight story, experience, and kind of optimize the marketing funnel. And those pose two very different challenges, but the process and the output winds up being very similar.
You guys are obviously helping entrepreneurs kind of build that roadmap they need to ensure, or at least give them the highest chances of success, but that comes at a cost, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys don't like working for free. So, I mean, if you want to tell us what you typically charge and how you price these projects, and then how do you guys get paid? I mean, if it's very early on, there may not be enough capital to hire a branding agency. So is that when you guys kind of work on the IOUs and you pay us when you raise that first big round?
We definitely stay away from the IOU. I think that we often have to get creative and be flexible. And put simply, if all we cared about was making money, our focus wouldn't be working with really early stage startups. So we're not financially driven. We're really passionate about helping people bring new businesses to the world, and we pour ourselves into the work that we do. At the same time, we have a really talented team that we have to make sure gets paid, and they can't pay their rent with IOU, so we have to be careful about that. But I think the way we think about it is, in some cases, we'll be a bit flexible about how much cash we're getting paid and partner with a team and take equity. We did that with our first client, hadnt, back in 2007, who was acquired by Adobe a few years ago. Similar relationship with Casper and Allbirds and Bowery and a bunch of companies that we've worked with. But at the end of the day, from a business perspective, we have to make sure that we can cover our operating costs, and we have a pretty thorough and holistic approach. And one way I like to describe it is that we don't work to a budget. So if someone comes to us and says, hey, I've only got $20,000, we don't whip up the $20,000 version of what we do. We look at it more like, are we going to be set up for success to deliver the thing that the person is coming to us for? And oftentimes someone's looking at the work we've done and they want that quality of output and that impact. And that's something that takes, typically thousands of hours. We're working over 5-6 months across multiple work streams, building out a team of 15, 18 people across a bunch of different disciplines, collaborating, and that's a lot of effort to make it happen. But I'd say, if we're working with a team that's raising a $2-3 million seed round, they're probably investing somewhere in the realm of 10 to 20%, depending on the category and the type of business and what exactly they need into the work that we're doing. And ultimately, I think, there's a pretty broad spectrum of perspectives that founders have about the importance of brand, when they want to focus on it. And we wind up working with teams that I think opt into a philosophy of brand being a really key driver of the success of their business. And that's a part of why, in many cases, we're talking to teams before they've gone out and started, pitching investors, because they want to make sure that they've got a plan in place. And probably one of the key questions they're going to get is, this is a great business idea, but what's it going to look like? And having a partner like us at the table can help to de-risk that conversation and make sure that the right team's in place to really bring it to life.
So, okay, you bring up a bunch of good points there. So with your track record of success and some of the great companies you guys have worked with, are investors more comfortable with I guess that 10 or 20%? And do you guys sometimes get involved with helping entrepreneurs, assuming that you really love the idea and you want to work with the company? Will you get involved in helping them build relationships with investors?
Yeah, quite often. And the 10 to 20% piece, I realized might have been misleading in terms of what I was referring to. But that was referring to percentage of their round in terms of what they're spending. Because I know we were talking about equity stuff too. But yeah, I think what we've found is, we've got a network of investors, many of them at the seed stage and some, more growth stage as well, that have invested in companies that we've worked with, and they've seen the success of that work and the businesses that they've invested in, and have an understanding and appreciation for the approach that we take. And I think these days the market is becoming more and more and more competitive, and having a great product is becoming table stakes in most categories. So with that dynamic, if you're an investor, you want to ensure you've got a great team, there's a scalable market opportunity, the product's differentiated. But then it also starts mattering about, okay, well, what is the experience going to be like? Do they have the right PR team? How's their comm strategy? All those other variables are starting to matter an incredible amount. So what we find is that investors are really open to having that conversation. And if we're excited about a team, they'll take a meeting. It doesn't mean they're going to invest, because there's a lot of other variables in terms of, the categories they've invested in recently, whether they have to lead around or open to following on. But quite often we're getting behind entrepreneurs we believe in and connecting to people that we think could be a good fit and helping them to raise a round.
What sector do you think is the hottest right now? And I know it's kind of a hard question to ask, but is there a particular sector or industry where you guys see the most interest from investors, or you've just had the most success in general with different brands?
That's a good question. So I think I can tell you what we're seeing a lot of, which, everything kind of comes in waves and cycles, but we've been approached by a tremendous number of companies in fintech and insurance over the last 6 months. And I think that's a trend that's been happening for a while, but I think things are really heating up, and the next 12 to 18 months are going to be very interesting in those spaces. We're also seeing, I think, more and more and more in the food and beverage space, with some of the acquisitions that have happened recently and the success of businesses that are not kind of like obviously tech fundable businesses. More investors are getting open to investing in that category, especially businesses that are doing really innovative things, and sort of that intersection of, it's sort of like science and food. There's a lot of really innovative things happening where people are figuring out processes and ways to create products that are completely disrupting very, very large categories. So we've been seeing some stuff in that space we're really excited about. We've worked on a lot of direct consumer businesses, and that's come about from the success of a few companies that we've worked with. I'd say in particular Casper, where we were working in a category that people didn't really care about. Like no one really had a beloved mattress brand. Yeah, so that was one where I think the delta of change from sort of apathy or disdain in the category to one of love and engagement really caught people's attention. And recently Allbirds, which I'm wearing a pair of their lounges right now, that brand has been doing exceptionally well and have a really, really great product. And so we wound up seeing a lot of businesses that are looking to follow in that model of what was sort of an e-commerce first or e-commerce only model, now I think evolving to businesses that are thinking of starting with e-com, but ultimately, being much more open-minded about other channels as well. And it's a space where they know brand is going to be critical, and they also typically know that they're going to be one of multiple people trying to crack it. We tend to see, if you pick a given product category, we'll wind up seeing 3 to 5 different teams that are looking at a similar space. That could happen over the course of a few weeks or a couple months. And quite often those same teams are talking to the range of investors, and everyone's trying to figure out chemistry and where a good fit is. And that's something that's happening in a lot of categories, but especially in the direct consumer space.
So besides coming on to awesome podcasts like this, how else do you guys typically find your clients?
A lot of it's through relationships and referrals. I think there's, in the world of startups and venture, it's a very community-driven space. So people who are thinking about starting a business are quite often socializing that with, other entrepreneurs, investors, both with the aim of potentially raising money, but also just getting feedback and getting pointed in the right direction. So we find that founders that we've worked with are often, recommending teams to speak with us. Investors that are looking at companies in the space, whether they've already invested or are considering it, tend to point people our way. And then in some cases, people are just familiar with the work that we've done and curious to have a conversation. What we do is sort of an interesting variable, because in many scenarios we're a bit of a secret weapon, and founders aren't launching their companies and in the headline of the press talking about us. So it's more of you got to be doing some searching and trying to figure out, if you're specifically looking for that help, to figure out who's the right fit.
Your 2 co-founders, how did you guys all come together to start working on this?
Yeah, so Emily Hayward, who's one of my co-founders and our chief strategist. Emily and I met back in 2003. We were both working at Saatchi & Saatchi in New York. And at the time, we sort of the one fun fact on that, we didn't actually work together. We were just part of a group of friends who were about the same age, and spent a lot of time hanging out. And probably our fondest memory is that back when the OC was cool, we had a group of us that would go out and get lunch, book a conference room, and Emily would tape the OC the night before, and we'd all sit and watch it for an hour, which was our little fun escape. And we had our plan that if we ever got caught, we were going to say we were doing team research to make sure that we were connected to the youth. And then so Emily and we started working together in 2007 or 2006 actually. Hired her to come join me when I was running a small agency, and we really hit it off. And about the same time, I got introduced to Simon, who is our chief creative officer, and he had a design studio on the Lower East Side, and he was originally a New Zealander, and I met him through someone involved in the company that I was working with, and that's when we started working together. So we started about 2007.
Okay. I know you guys are self-funded, like I said in the intro. It's pretty typical for an agency. So what are the challenges with bootstrapping an agency?
Oh man, service business, it's a beast. We've found so many moments of our business learning really painful things that seem obvious after the fact. I think we've always wished we had the ability to sort of hire talent out ahead of what we need. But being, a bootstrapped, organically grown business, we don't have the capital to really invest in, say, bringing on really senior leadership who's done it all before. So we get to run the gauntlet of learning the hard way. But I think we've been really fortunate to attract an incredibly talented team who are excited about the mission of what we do. And we've kind of got this interesting little, very hardworking oasis of people that get to work on businesses that are, getting out in the world, changing people's lives. In the world of corporate America, quite often you can work on something for a year or 2 years and then it never even launches. And we're existing in a world where people are coming to us and saying, like, how fast can we launch this thing? And it actually gets out into the world and you get to see it and watch it come to life. So that's been, I think, probably the biggest advantage that we've had is that we're able to work on things where there's true passion behind it. But yeah, building an agency it's a pretty hard thing. And to the point of not having outside capital, I think it's because we are a people business. No one's going to invest in something that kind of hasn't already been created. So we've had to really just be heads down and focus on the work we do and earn our way into opportunities.
Have you guys been profitable since year one?
Yeah, year one we had incredibly low overhead. So it was sort of right, okay. It was me and Emily, so we were able to kind of be in survival mode. And we started right before the recession, which I guess was in 2008. So it was, it was good that it happened then because we were lean enough that we could sort of just weather it out. And that actually led to a whole bunch of new businesses that evolved out of the kind of the challenges in the economy and a bunch of people getting laid off and deciding just to give it a wing and become an entrepreneur. But yeah, we've been profitable from the beginning. And I think always taken it really seriously that we had to run a successful business. And especially when it comes to taking equity, I often get the question of, so you're doing that, which means you don't make any money. But we've thought about it where we have to be kind of just spreading out the risk and making sure that we have enough of a cushion to be safe and not overextend ourselves.
So with regards to pricing, say it's, $150,000 engagement, to work with Red Antler, and they're paying $50,000 in cash, and then the other $100,000 will go towards equity. Are you guys doing like an early priced round with them and coming up with some valuation, or is that $100,000 kind of going in at whatever valuation they come up with at the first round?
Yeah, there's not one answer to that. And the reason being that, we meet people where there's literally just kind of nothing in place. And that typically winds up being more of a percentage conversation. And then we're meeting teams who are in the midst of raising a round. And like, depending on what the traction of that is, they might be more bullish or less about how it's all going to come together. And then we meet teams who have already closed a round. So it's obviously a different conversation at that stage. But, one thing I can say is when we think about the work that we do, the price and the value are kind of two different things. So there's what companies can afford to spend when they're early stage and have limited resources. But then there's kind of the impact of that work if it's successful, and the value of it in terms of the market and companies that are more established and have more money who are willing to pay more for the same thing. So when we're getting into discounting, or if we're getting paid less cash for work that we're doing, we tend to think of it with a premium against it. So, we'll sort of figure out an equation where it feels fair that we're helping them out and making things easier in terms of near-term cash flow, and then we feel like there's benefit for us to take some risk and the upside. And, we're ultimately going to probably dilute and have to pay tax and all sorts of other stuff. So it's winds up being a fair deal on all fronts.
So over my last 190 plus interviews, whenever I ask an entrepreneur or, whoever the founder is that I'm interviewing, what are the keys to success? I think the two most common answers are the people and focus. So in terms of people, where are you typically hiring from? Are you hiring from other agencies? And then in your opinion, what's the hardest position to hire for?
Good question. So we're hiring from a range of places, and the reason being that the suite of services that we offer is a pretty broad spectrum, and there aren't that many companies that do as wide of a range of work, from industrial design to, digital design to campaign work to content production. So we've got a pretty broad spectrum of backgrounds, people who have been in more traditional ad agency world, brand consultancies, smaller design studios. But then we've also got people who have come from like brand management, so being client side and looking to kind of jump over to working with more companies and leveraging that internal perspective to switch to the agency side. We also have a few team members who have joined us from outside of the agency world. One who joined us from the venture capital world as an investor, another who was leading marketing at a startup in San Francisco and was interested in joining us to kind of help lots of companies with marketing versus being just within one business. So we're pretty open-minded and looking for just really talented, smart, curious people who are excited about what we're specifically doing, and looking for that fit and chemistry. I think background winds up being much less important. In terms of the hardest role, I think probably strategy. We have a really specific approach to how we think about brand strategy, and our strategists are also all really incredible writers, which is not necessarily a common combination. And Emily, my co-founder who leads that team and is absolutely brilliant, I think has an incredibly high bar, and the team that she's built is unbelievable, every one of them in their own unique way. But it's been really hard to find people that fit the approach we have and have the range of skill set and ultimately intuition. So I think it's about understanding what makes people tick and how to position a brand and tell a story in a way that gets that like true emotional reaction.
So maybe I'm, a negative person, but I like sometimes talking about failures because I think we can learn a lot from those. And we've talked about some of the big success stories and the brands you guys have worked with. What are a couple that didn't necessarily work out? And you don't have to name the company, but maybe what was wrong with either the strategy or, the market opportunity or funding or, what complexities played a role in something not working out?
Yep. We've seen a lot of stuff through the years. I'd say the most common is people and personalities. So we've seen teams that, the internal chemistry just implodes and teams desert. We've seen founders fight and break up and dissolve a company. That's probably the most common thing we've seen is just like the internal dynamics are such that a healthy business can't thrive. We've also seen scenarios where businesses were built off of particular access to data or specific partnerships that, for whatever reason, get shut down, and that business then just literally can't survive. So we've watched that happen a couple times. And we've seen scenarios where, companies didn't raise enough out of the gates and then get stuck because that point from you launch to raising your next round of funding, if you don't have enough of a runway to learn and figure things out and have the data that's going to get people excited, regardless of how much potential the business has or how much everyone loves the brand, if you can't connect those dots, then you're just going to be sort of, dead in the water. So we've seen people struggle through that phase. And that can happen for various reasons. Either it's, too hard to raise initially because of the category, or people trying to not dilute too much and give up too much equity, which can be a short-sighted move. And then I think, something that we see more common than we would like is that people hire a partner like us, or let's say they hire us, and there's this expectation that building a brand equates to, you have a style guide. There's this PDF that has the rules about, your logo, your color palette, typography system, sample applications, and that playbook automatically unlocks all the success you're going to need in the future. When in reality, that's really just step one. And so we try to be really, really thoughtful about finding partnerships where we know that we can continue working with that team, whatever capacity is going to be necessary for them to be successful, and collaborate and think about how the brand comes to life across, a marketing site, an e-com experience, thinking about content and what gets pushed through social channels and email and direct response. And the most successful work we've done has come out of really great partnerships. And I think we've seen a lot of missed opportunity with companies where, the first step goes really well, and then stuff gets passed to kind of a bunch of different people who are each running in their own direction. And that doesn't necessarily lead to failure. I think that we are still having a pretty big impact on those businesses, but it leads to missed opportunity, where they could have brought it to life in such a deeper, more meaningful way, but things just kind of got cut short.
Very good answer. So I had a question that just popped out of my head. Okay, here we go. If you could go back 10 years and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Meditate more.
Seriously?
Yeah, totally.
You meditate now?
Yeah, because building a business is such a crazy roller coaster, and no matter how many times I've ridden the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, it always catches me off guard more than I would like. And it's taken me many years to find, the sort of mental stability and peace within that craziness. And I think I learned the hard way much more than I would have liked to. And at the end of the day, back to what he said, right? It's people in focus. That focus piece requires you being able to see through the noise of what's truly important, versus what is just sort of distracting you. And, I've grown up a lot over 10 years, and I think having a business and being an entrepreneur has forced me to build out a whole set of skills that I otherwise wouldn't have. But that calm and focus, and being able to sort of see the vision, stay strategic, and be a leader amidst it, is just absolutely critical.
What's one skill that you've realized you do not possess? So you better surround yourself with someone that does have that skill.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've learned about myself that I really love, I love people. I love finding and seeing opportunity and connections. I think I do really well existing in the abstract. What I don't love is the details of execution, and sort of the operations of how something gets done. I can, have an opinion about it, and typically do, but I don't want to be the one digging into the weeds to figure it out. And that being said, sort of the ironic detail in that is that I'm also like totally OCD and am the person within our team that if someone shows me a homepage for something that we're working on, I'll notice that like the navigation is a pixel off. I've done that probably 20 times. So I guess I like the big picture and like the very, very, very tiny details, but not the piece in between.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Did we skip over anything that you wanted a chance to talk about? I mean, I've pretty much run through all my questions, but I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything.
No, that was great, man. I think it was a good range of topics that covers the spectrum of what we do and what we care about.
Are most of your clients in the New York area? I mean, I'm sure you work with clients all over, but are they heavily centralized in New York?
Yeah, actually, that is a good question. So we do have a lot of clients in New York, but actually a pretty big number of clients out on the West Coast, between San Francisco, LA, and sprinkled kind of across the country. Lately been doing a bit more work over in Europe as well. I've got projects going on right now in Berlin and Sweden. But yeah, and I think that as people are understanding that's getting towards critical nature of brand and are seeking out partners to work with, we've found that our client base is really kind of broadened and diversified, which is awesome and means more travel for our team as we are bouncing around and meet with different teams.
And last question here, are there any companies that you guys turned down that you wish you hadn't?
Oh, that's a risky question. Any companies we turned down that we wish we hadn't? Well, we met with Uber super early on, and I really wish we had worked with them. That's one. Yeah. Probably like 2010.
Oh, wow. Hey, it happens, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all pass on projects that don't look good at the time that we look back and wish we hadn't passed.
Yeah, that one I think was more because we weren't on the West Coast and they wanted someone local or I don't know what, but that's a relatively large business that got away. But yeah, I mean, I tend to believe that for the most part, things shake out the way they're supposed to, and we've had plenty of scenarios where we met a company very early on and it wasn't the right fit then, and then we wind up working with them later. It's probably happened like 6 or 8 times. So we roll with it. Remain positive.
One last question, because this just kind of came into my head, and I can see where this might make sense at some point, given 10 years of experience and track record. Do you guys think you'll ever launch some sort of a venture fund?
Yeah, very good question. So
raise capital from LPs and then put some of that money into the companies that you guys are working with?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that for years. We've been approached a few times by people who had ideas of how to do it together in a partnership. And, the opportunity is absolutely there. And I think we're continuing to process what the right approach could be and how to do it, because on one hand, it seems pretty straightforward and obvious. And, we're meeting these teams at a moment when they need money and they trust us and we could write checks. On the other, it could create much harder conversations in the scenarios where we're not in a position to write a check. And also could, have the conversation always wind up starting with, will you write me a check versus will you help me build a great brand? Yeah, so we're being very cautious and waiting for the right moment when we find an approach that makes sense for us. But, I think later this year, we'll probably be in a place where we've at least got a phase 1 of how we want to think about it. I don't think it'll be a typical fund. But figuring out a way that we can better support the companies we're meeting really early stage and something that's mutually beneficial. So more to come on that once we actually figure it out.
Awesome. Well, I will end it there for you. I know you're a busy man. You probably got other things to do. So I want to thank you for spending some time with us. I appreciate all the very, very honest answers, and I wish you the best going forward.
Thanks, man. Great spending some time with you, and I really appreciate you having me.
Got it, man. Talk to you soon, JB. Take care.
You too. Take care.